Ever wonder why modern sleep feels so broken? We have the best mattresses, the quietest rooms, and endless advice. Yet people still wake up exhausted. Medieval folks, on the other hand, had a sleep pattern that worked so well, it might just be the best in history. The secret? Let's find out. If you've ever woken up at 2 a.m. and spent hours staring at the ceiling, here's a surprising revelation. Medieval people would have considered your sleeping pattern completely normal. In fact, they'd probably wonder why you weren't up doing something productive with those peaceful midnight hours. Medieval communities practiced what historians now call biphasic sleep. They slept in two distinct phases. When darkness fell, they'd settle in for their first sleep, lasting about 4 hours. They'd then rise for approximately 2 hours before returning to their second sleep until dawn. During these midnight hours, medieval households came alive in subtle ways, sharing stories with his wife, while monasteries recorded monks using this time for their deepest prayers and contemplation. Some people wrote letters by candlelight, others worked on crafts, and many simply sat in quiet conversation. These weren't considered interruptions to their sleep, they were essential parts of their daily rhythm. The original midnight oil wasn't burned because of procrastination. It was part of the plan all along. The midnight hours also served practical purposes in medieval communities. Town records show that craftsmen often used this time to check on their kilns or tend to slow cooking processes. Bakers would start preparing their dough, taking advantage of the perfect fermentation time between sleeps. Even in wealthy households, these hours had their uses, ladies using this time to catch up on their embroidery away from the day's demands. The original me time happened while everyone else was snoring through their first sleep. What makes this sleep pattern fascinating is how natural it seems to be for humans. When researchers in the 1990s conducted experiments where people lived without artificial light for several weeks, participants naturally fell into the same two-phase sleep pattern. Their bodies automatically adjusted to what medieval people had known all along. This was how humans were meant to rest. Turns out our ancestors weren't sleep-deprived. They were sleep-enlightened. The practice left its mark on medieval literature too. Canterbury Tales mentions characters rising between sleeps for various adventures, while household guides from the era provided specific recommendations for suitable midnight activities. Some even suggested that the thoughts and conversations during these hours carried special significance as the mind was in its clearest state. Medieval productivity gurus would have had a field day with this untapped time slot. Medical texts from the period show that doctors considered this midnight wakefulness beneficial for health. They believed it helped with everything from digestion to mental clarity. One physician wrote that dreams from the first sleep could reveal illnesses, while the period between sleeps was perfect for contemplating their meaning. Another recommended gentle stretching during this time, though he specifically advised against vigorous sword practice. Apparently, some enthusiastic knights needed this reminder. The original, "Don't exercise before bedtime." Warning. Archaeological evidence from medieval homes reveals just how widespread this practice was across Europe. Excavations have uncovered dedicated sitting nooks and alcoves in common houses specifically designed for these midnight activities. Special holders for rushlights, long-burning thin candles perfect for midnight reading or crafting, have been found in homes of all social classes, suggesting this wasn't just a habit of the wealthy. The original cozy reading corner wasn't by the fireplace. It was wherever you parked yourself at 2 a.m. A collection of letters from a French noblewoman in 1465 describes using this time to write poetry, claiming the silence between sleep brought her the clearest inspiration. A merchant's records show careful accounting done during these hours, noting that his mind was sharpest for numbers in the midnight quiet. Medieval insomniacs weren't counting sheep, they were counting actual money. The most fascinating accounts come from medieval hospitals, where nurses' logs regularly mention patients being most talkative and clear-minded during their midnight waking period. They used this time for administering certain medicines and recording symptoms, believing that observations made between sleeps were particularly reliable. The original hospital rounds happened when modern doctors would be dozing in the break room. For medieval people, this nighttime waking wasn't just about being awake. It was about experiencing a unique state of consciousness they called the watching hour. They believed this time held special qualities. Prayers were more likely to be answered, creative thoughts flowed more freely, and conversations reached deeper meanings. While we might see their beliefs as superstitious, Modern sleep studies have shown that this period between sleep phases often produces a distinct state of relaxed alertness, perfect for contemplation and gentle activity. The original mindfulness practice didn't require an app. People could recall with remarkable accuracy what they were doing during these hours, as it was such a distinct and valued part of their day. Several medieval towns show that alibis involving between-sleep activities were taken particularly seriously, as this was considered a time of heightened awareness and reliable memory. The original "I have a perfect alibi" wasn't about being at a party. It was about embroidering by candlelight. The remarkable aspect of this medieval sleep pattern wasn't just its existence, but how it created a special time for reflection and connection that our modern world has largely lost. And in those peaceful dark hours, with only the gentle flicker of candlelight to keep them company, medieval folks discovered another secret to perfect sleep. Modern bedrooms often look like Times Square at midnight, glowing phones, blinking electronics, and streetlights peeking through curtains. In contrast, medieval nights knew a darkness so complete it's almost impossible for us to imagine. The medieval night was profoundly, absolutely dark. No streetlights, no glowing screens, not even much moonlight in crowded cities where tall buildings blocked the sky. The only light sources were fires, candles, and oil lamps, and they weren't used casually. A single candle could cost a day's wages for an average worker, making artificial light a luxury most people used sparingly. Even wealthy merchants typically owned just 3 or 4 candles at a time. They were so valuable that some medieval wills specifically mentioned the inheritance of partly used candles. One particularly amusing case from York mentions a family dispute over a half-burnt beeswax candle of considerable size. Apparently, even medieval inheritance drama had its bright spots. Without artificial light, people's sleep patterns naturally align with sunset and sunrise. The human body produces melatonin, our sleep hormone, when it gets dark. Medieval people got a pure, undiluted dose of this natural sleep medicine every single night. Their bodies weren't confused by blue light from screens, which can suppress melatonin production by up to 85%, according to recent studies. Medieval medical texts show that doctors understood the connection between darkness and good sleep, even if they didn't know about melatonin. They advised patients with sleep troubles to ensure their sleeping chambers were as dark as possible. A physician wrote that sleep comes best to those who embrace the darkness like a warm blanket, poetic and scientifically accurate even if he didn't know why. The darkness shaped medieval society in interesting ways. Towns had strict curfews, not just for safety, but because activities requiring visual precision simply couldn't be done after dark. Workers in detailed crafts like embroidery or manuscript illumination were forbidden from working after sunset to prevent eye strain and maintain quality. Darkness affected commerce too. Many towns had specific darkness prices for certain goods. Items cost more if you needed to buy them after sunset, simply because of the extra candles needed to conduct business. Some merchants specialized in night trade, charging premium prices for emergency supplies after dark. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of medieval darkness was how people adapted to it. They developed an entire sensory world that modern humans have largely lost. People could identify others by their footsteps, distinguish between different animals in complete darkness, and navigate familiar spaces using touch and sound alone. In the 15th century, night watchmen described being able to tell the time of night by the sounds of different insects and birds. The darkness even affected architecture. Medieval builders designed homes with clever light wells and strategically placed windows to maximize natural light during the day. They used light-colored plaster on interior walls to reflect and amplify what little light was available. Some wealthy homes had special niches called light cups, curved recesses that help reflect and amplify the light from a single candle. Medieval monasteries took darkness particularly seriously. Monastic records show elaborate systems for maintaining darkness in dormitories. Some monasteries even had designated darkness keepers whose job was to ensure no unauthorized lights disturbed the monks' sleep. These medieval sleep guardians would patrol the halls, watching for any stray candlelight that might disrupt the natural sleep cycle. The value of darkness was so ingrained in medieval culture that many towns had laws protecting it. Light pollution wasn't just considered wasteful, it was illegal. Records from several European cities show fines for unnecessary illumination after certain hours. In 1486, it was declared that he who wastes light at night steals sleep from his neighbors, a concept our brightly lit modern cities might want to reconsider. This deep darkness had profound effects on sleep quality. Without artificial light extending their days, medieval people typically spent 6 to 8 hours in natural darkness before even attempting sleep. This extended period of darkness helped their bodies build up significant stores of melatonin, leading to deeper and more refreshing sleep. Hospital records from the period show that healing wards were designed to be particularly dark. The windows were carefully positioned to avoid morning light disturbing patients' rest, and thick curtains were used to maintain darkness even during the day for those who needed it. Medieval doctors noted that patients in darker rooms typically recovered faster, though they attributed this to the soothing properties of shadow rather than the biological benefits we now understand. As the gentle darkness of medieval nights gave way to our artificially lit world, we lost something profound: the experience of true, natural darkness and its benefits for sleep. Yet there was another element of medieval sleep that worked hand in hand with this darkness to create perfect sleeping conditions. Privacy in medieval times meant something completely different than it does today. While we might balk at the idea of sharing our bed with strangers, medieval people thought nothing of it. In fact, bed sharing wasn't just common, it was expected, practical, and sometimes even legally required. There was an innkeeper in York being fined for giving travelers separate beds when his inn wasn't full. The magistrate's ruling stated that it is against custom and wastes good firewood to heat multiple chambers when guests can share warmth. Medieval hospitality meant literal togetherness, whether you liked it or not. Talk about mandatory cuddling. A merchant complained about being paired with a most vigorous snorer who could wake the dead, though the innkeeper's response was simply to charge him extra for having the bed to himself. The first noise cancellation fee in history. The practical benefits of bed sharing went beyond just staying warm. Medieval houses weren't heated like modern homes. Most rooms had no heat source at all. The main heating came from shared body warmth, and people developed sophisticated systems for maximizing it. Household guides from the period describe the ideal arrangement of sleepers, with the youngest who generated the most body heat placed in the middle. Children were essentially medieval hot water bottles. Monasteries had particularly well-documented sleeping arrangements. Their dormitory records show monks sleeping 2 or 3 to a bed, with strict rules about maintaining proper distance and dignity. One monastery's regulations included a fine for excessive nocturnal wandering, presumably for monks who couldn't stay still in their sleep. Brother Thomas, please control your limbs or face spiritual consequences. The practice affected furniture design too. Medieval beds were larger than modern ones, built to accommodate multiple sleepers. A standard merchant's bed from the 1400s was typically 8 feet wide, enough for 4 adults to sleep comfortably. The beds were also shorter, as people often slept partially sitting up, believing that lying completely flat encouraged bad dreams. When your nightmares could involve actual plague, sitting up seemed reasonable. This communal sleeping had interesting social effects. There were conversations and agreements made in the bed fellowship, suggesting that these shared sleeping spaces were also important places for social bonding and business discussions. In 1478, it was decided based on testimony from someone who overheard a crucial conversation while sharing a bed at an inn. The original listening device was just another person under the covers. Children's sleeping arrangements were particularly communal. Rather than having their own rooms, children typically slept in large groups, often in the same bed. This practice was thought to help with everything from warmth to character development. Medieval parenting guides suggested that children who slept alone might become selfish or fearful. Nothing builds character like getting kicked by 6 siblings all night long. The practice wasn't without its challenges. Numerous complaints about bed sharing gone wrong, from stolen blankets to midnight kicks. There was a merchant suing an inn because his bed partner did sing sea shanties in his sleep with such vigor that no rest could be had. The first documented case of sleep singing disorder. Some inns developed creative solutions to common bed-sharing problems. Some established snorers' chambers, special rooms for particularly loud sleepers. Others had systems for matching travelers based on their sleeping habits, sort of like a medieval version of roommate matching. Sir, according to our records, you're a blanket tugger, so we've paired you with a heat radiator who doesn't mind. Guild records reveal that some professions had specific bed-sharing customs. Bakers, who needed to wake up extremely early, were often paired together in inns. One baker notes that members should seek the company of their own trade in sleep, lest the early riser disturb the late sleeper's rest. The Baker Brotherhood united in dough and dozing. The practice of bed sharing also influenced architecture. Many medieval homes were built with large, shared sleeping chambers rather than individual bedrooms. These rooms often had multiple fireplaces and carefully planned ventilation systems to keep the air fresh for many sleepers. Architectural records from the period show that wealthy merchants' homes typically had one large sleeping chamber rather than several smaller ones. The original open floor plan was actually an open bed plan. Interestingly, medieval medical texts suggest that shared sleeping was considered beneficial for mental health. Several physicians' guides recommend the comfort of shared rest as a treatment for melancholy or anxiety. One doctor wrote that solitary sleep breeds solitary thoughts, while shared sleep brings shared peace. The first sleep therapy was simply adding more people to your bed. The end of widespread bed sharing came gradually with changes in architecture and heating. As private bedrooms became more common and houses better heated, the practice began to fade. Yet people actually reported worse sleep after switching to private beds. They missed the warmth and company they were used to. The first cases of empty nest syndrome may have been empty bed syndrome. While sharing a bed with strangers might seem odd to us now, medieval people would probably find our insistence on sleeping alone equally bizarre. But there was more to medieval sleep comfort than just shared body heat. Before memory foam and pillow-top mattresses, medieval people slept on something far simpler and possibly better for their backs. Most medieval beds consisted of a wooden frame filled with fresh straw, known as a straw tick. While it might sound primitive, this bedding choice had some remarkable benefits. Household accounts from the 1400s reveal the seasonal ritual of changing straw. Every harvest brought fresh straw for bedding, with the old straw being recycled as animal feed or garden mulch. Wealthier households changed their straw more frequently. One noble family's records show monthly straw replacements, noting that fresh straw brings fresh dreams. The straw wasn't just tossed into a pile, there was an art to bed making. Professional bed makers showed detailed instructions for layering and arranging straw to create different levels of firmness. Some bed makers became famous for their technique, with one 15th century craftsman known as Thomas the Soft Layer, charging premium prices for his services. These straw mattresses proved surprisingly adaptable. During hot summers, the straw could be loosely packed for better air circulation. In winter, tighter packing provides better insulation. Some households kept different types of straw for different seasons: wheat straw for summer and rye straw for winter. Medical records from the period suggest that these firm straw beds might have been healthier than our modern ultra-soft mattresses. Medieval doctors noted fewer complaints about back pain among their patients. Wealthier medieval folks did have alternatives. Feather beds existed, but came with their own problems. One noble family complained about the perpetual warfare with bed bugs that feast upon our feathers. Another account describes a merchant who switched back to straw after his expensive feather bed became a kingdom of fleas. The maintenance of straw beds created its own economy. Professional straw turners would visit households to fluff and rearrange the straw, ensuring even wear. These craftsmen also checked for unwanted visitors. Cost records showed that straw beds were remarkably economical. A year's worth of fresh straw cost about the same as 2 days' wages for an average worker. Compare this to feather beds, which could cost several months' wages. One amusing court case from 1467 involves a man trying to pay his taxes with one slightly used feather bed, which the tax collector firmly refused. The type of straw used mattered greatly. Wheat straw was considered the best, followed by rye. Oat straw was avoided as it tended to attract mice. One medieval saying warned that oat straw in the bed brings four-legged guests. Clever merchants sometimes tried to sell inferior straw as premium wheat straw, leading to the creation of straw inspectors in some towns. Innovations in straw bed design show medieval ingenuity. Some beds had multiple layers of different straw types, creating what we might call the world's first hybrid mattress. Others included aromatic herbs between the layers, lavender for relaxation, mint to deter pests, and rosemary, which was believed to prevent nightmares. The practice influenced language too. Many common phrases originated from straw bed terminology. Hit the hay obviously refers to going to bed, but in the thick of it originally described the middle of a well-packed straw mattress, and needle in a haystack likely came from the dreaded experience of losing a sewing needle in one's bed. Monasteries provide detailed guidelines for bed maintenance. One monastery required weekly straw turning with additional rules about proper straw disposal. They believed old straw should be burned rather than reused, as it might retain fragments of dreams best returned to heaven, an early form of spiritual recycling, perhaps. Medieval hospitals had their own specifications for therapeutic straw beds. They used different straw densities for different ailments, softer for fever patients, firmer for those with back problems. Some hospitals even maintained special straw gardens where they grew specific types of grain just for bedding. One heated case involved a bed maker accused of mixing river reeds with his straw to increase profits. The judge ordered him to sleep on his own creation for a month as punishment, a sentence that probably left him feeling rather prickly about his business practices. The simple practicality of straw bedding perfectly complemented medieval sleeping habits. The breathable nature of straw meant sleepers stayed cool in summer and, when combined with shared body heat, warm in winter. Even the subtle rustling sound of the straw moving was considered beneficial. One medical text suggests it provided a gentle lullaby for troubled sleepers.